Our talk today is A Most Excellent Life. Duh. You know, as I was looking at the chapter on Judaism and world religion, I realized anyone else who's following along, we're for those of you who don't know, we've been doing world religions all year long. We're pretty far along in the book, and whether you've been reading the book or coming to the talks, we've really explored a lot this year, and the vastness of it has been so wonderful, and all the different perspectives. We've taken in quite a bit. It's really, I was just feeling it for the first time, like, wow, this has just been a lot, all these different religions. And so I hope you've had an opportunity to, even if you haven't had a chance to read the book, to touch in, like just read a few paragraphs of the book, or hear a few of the different talks in the different religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Islam, Judaism, and next month will be the indigenous religions. Euston Smith refers to them as the primal religions because they were first. They were before these traditional religions. So we've been this month, and into October, talking about Judaism. And one of the qualities about Judaism that I recognize and have seen is this value of excellence. And I think a lot of that has to do with, in Judaism, they don't spend a lot of time talking about the afterlife, whether it's heaven or whether you're going to be reincarnated. Judaism really focuses on the here and now. They're like, well, we're not quite sure what's on the other side of the veil. There's different ideas, but we do know this exists, this time and place exists now, and it's our job, since we're here, to make this world a better place. And that is an incredible value that is brought, because if you're only thinking that this is what matters, this is what's real, then you want to make it the best you possibly can make it. In high school, I had a friend named Liz Routman, and she's Jewish, and she carried this in everything that she did, everything. She just brought so much excellence to, she was a dancer, she was a choreographer, she was an academic. She thought deeply about everything. We never just went out and had hot chocolate. We had and talked about like light things. Every conversation was deep and meaningful. And I remember we saw the movie Splash with Tom Hanks, and suddenly we got this deep philosophical discussion about Splash, and I just thought she's like the best friend ever, because everything is so deep and rich. And I remember when she applied to colleges, I say in the past tense because she has passed on to the other side of the veil. She continues to live, but on the other side of the veil, and living her excellence there. But she got into every college she applied to. I think she applied to all Ivy League schools and ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania. But that level of excellence pervaded our friendship. And I got a lot from being her friend because of that. Everything was important. Everything had value. She never just sloughed off anything. And I've been thinking about this quality in Judaism of excellence because a couple weeks ago, last week, I guess it was last week, many of us went and saw Reverend Michael Beckwith speak. Reverend Michael's a minister from down in Los Angeles. He's the minister of a spiritual community there called Agape. And we kept using excellence throughout his talk, and I've been listening to Reverend Michael since 1992. And what I realized as I was listening, a lot of the ideas I've heard before, but this theme of excellence has been in almost always, from the beginning. He just threads in this idea of excellence into every one of his talks. It just seems to be so important. So I think because we're studying about Judaism, and I'm very conscious of the qualities and values of that religion, and hearing him talking about excellence and having heard him talk about excellence so much, I started contemplating, what is this idea of excellence? What do we mean? Live a life of excellence. What does that look like? And I started thinking of the obvious moments. Actually, I looked up A Most Excellent Life. I just wanted to see what would show up. And a lot of pages for artists came up, all sculptors, artists, musicians, performance. And we think of excellence as those moments where you're in a performance or you're seeing an artwork and you're like, your breath is sort of taken away by the excellence, by the almost beyond worldly experience that we have. Julian, especially Jack and Julian, like to watch sports highlights. Those are moments of excellence, an athlete working so hard and playing in all these games, and then there's this moment of excellence in a game. And so sports highlights are just like one moment of excellence after another, and they're just so inspiring to watch. They push us beyond what we think is possible. So I was thinking, what does spiritual excellence look like? Well, Reverend Michael is an example of spiritual excellence, and I'm going to get back to him. But I just want to take it so it's not just focused on his style, because he has a definite style. Well, what Reverend Michael does, it's what I shared in our foundations class. What Reverend Michael does is he lifts people up to a higher dimension. Yeah, in Hinduism, it's called darshan. They give, a Hindu guru will give you energy. In Buddhism, it's called transmission. What they're doing is they're giving this experience of the divine, which is always ever present. We hear all these words, we hear all these languages, concepts. We talk a lot about it, but to actually have a direct contact, so it's no longer just a theoretical idea. It's no longer just a concept. It's a living reality to you in that moment. Suddenly you realize, oh, this is why I'm doing all this spiritual work. This is what I'm striving for. So that's the purpose of a transmission or giving darshan. Now, often in the Eastern traditions, it's done one-on-one with a student. It can be in a private meeting, but usually what these often gurus, for those of you who may, Amma, for instance, I use her because she has a ashram here in San Ramon. People will spend hours in meditation in her ashram when she comes to get a hug from her, because when you get a hug, you receive this darshan. You receive this moment of enlightenment of what it is to experience the divine. So people will wait and wait and wait just to get that one hug. When I was at Agape, there was a Hindu guru whose name I can no longer remember. Guru Mai. And she used to give darshan by a peacock feather. She would tap you with a peacock feather. There's many ways teachers have done this. What Reverend Michael does, he gets everybody's energy so high up, and in such a short time. You can only do this if you're a spiritual master. He gets energy, so he's not just doing it one-on-one, he's doing it collectively. So he's taking in a group, and he's been doing this for years. That's what Sunday and Wednesday night services are at Agape. He's raising everyone. He's giving darshan. He's transmitting the divine presence so people walk in there. I can't tell you how many times we walked out of a Sunday service and saying, man, that was great. He's a great gift of language. So you have these little words and phrases. But you're really like, what did he talk about? Because the words are so secondary to the energy that you're feeling, and it feels so good, and you're just flying high, and you have to actually think about, thank you, Jill, for those notes, by the way. She wrote notes about things he said. You have to think about the words, because what you've experienced is the divine. So if we're looking at what spiritual excellence is, that's a wonderful example of what spiritual excellence is. So as I mentioned, I started hearing his talks in 1992, got really involved in the community in 1994, and by beginning of 1997, I started working at in the Agape community and their staff. And what was interesting, so I was very excited, as we all were. You go to every Wednesday, Sunday service, you're flying high, you're trying to get everybody else to experience it, giving tapes, this is how long ago it was, cassette tapes, giving people cassette tapes. You got to come to service with me. You got to experience this. This is like the divine. You're trying to get everybody. You're in that high, and it's great because it's every Sunday and Wednesday. You don't have to pay $50 to go here and drive 2 hours. So it feels great, and it feels so rich and full. But it's funny when it keeps happening. After a couple of years, it actually becomes normal. Like that just becomes the normal way of being. It doesn't feel so exceptional anymore. Everyone's participating, and then there's this other aspect, and this is what I wanted to, as we're looking at a most excellent life. So I have this example of what the most excellent life is. But then there's the everyday life. And so as I got on staff there, I got to see the daily life. And what I discovered, one of the things Reverend Michael said is when in this absolute place, there are no problems. When we are in this divine absolute energy, everything is perfect. So the more we return to that, all these problems will dissolve into the nothingness, which is true. But we also live in this human world. So as I was on staff at Agape, we had the human world. We had all the same things that happen in normal life happen. the financial aspects, the politics between people, it was a growing church. It was already a couple thousand by this point. There was just overworked staff, and then at some point we moved buildings, and that was chaotic, and everything was just like chaos on some level. And so I was so there was that, just the daily living of it. And I'm thinking, okay, spiritual excellence on the daily life. Got some work to do there. And then there's another aspect that also was hard for me. You're in this really high vibrational frequency. If you ever experienced it, whether it's through a teacher, through just a spiritual, you've had many spiritual awakenings, anything can wake up, give you that moment. It's so good that your mind isn't in gear yet. But eventually you'll come back to your human self and start interpreting what just happened. And so what I found is that there was a lot of different interpretations of what was happening on Sunday mornings. And I didn't always resonate with the interpretations. And I didn't always resonate with always with people's heart. There's never the thing I never questioned was the purity of people's heart. The people who are come to Agape love God and want to serve it. And yet sometimes how they understood it and how I understood it were different. And to pull yourself back to think about, to contemplate this vastness, you're pulling yourself away a little bit. Well, do I believe everything that Reverend Michael is saying? Because when you're in it, this is, by the way, and this is really important, I really want to stress this, because this is also how cults work. People who are, this is why I always say Reverend Michael's the real deal, because his heart is pure and everything he does. Never have I ever questioned the place from which he is coming. It is nothing but pure. But that doesn't mean I always have resonated with the things he says or agreed with. And that was confusing to me at first. How can I be in this vast, incredibly uplifted place and say, well, maybe, is that true? Do I really believe that? But I had to do that. That's part of my nature. And it should be, I hope it's something you all develop in your own mind, because people take advantage of, leaders take advantage of raising people up energetically, and then they manipulate. And people don't know they're being manipulated because they're not stepping back and saying, do I really believe this? So having some level of skepticism, or if you have a real teacher if they have total space to let you question and doubt. And Reverend Michael always gave me 100% space to question and doubt. Not just me, anybody. There's people who question and doubt, you have thousands of people coming in the community. Never try to control anyone's thoughts. You have a real teacher then. He's not doing it for his ego. He's not doing it, you have to agree with me, or I'm not validated, or no. People can doubt, question, think for themselves. In fact, just on a side note, I remember, because I literally did this at the time, I went to my head. I was in my office. This is a very successful ministry. People's lives are changing. People are growing and evolving. And yet I would say every single day in my office, we were the education office, there was somebody who was coming in and complaining about something Reverend Michael was or was not doing. And I remember going like this to myself: note to self, no matter how successful you are, you're never good enough. Because, that's our human nature. We not only do that to ourselves, we do it to other people. So it was, and he let it. He didn't try to stop people. He just let people everyone's on their own journey. So I had to find who I was in all this. What did I really think? And so what happened is I left in 2000, and then at first I was sort of still in the swirl. Being in Agape, you're sort of in the middle of everything. I was in the education department. And then when I went off and became a minister at Celebration, that swirl, he and Reverend Nirvana and Ricky all came out. And so I was still sort of in the swirl of the celebrity energy in some way. But I had to withdraw from that, because I had to still was getting clear, well, what do I believe? When I'm not lifted up into these states of ecstasy, what do I really believe about things? What do I really value? And mostly what became really important to me is, what does spiritual excellence look like in the everyday life? Today we had that reading, The Moments of High Resolve, and the dust and the grit of the journey, of the everyday life, the low-levelness of just the mundaneness of getting the dishes done, of getting your bills paid, of the responsibilities. What does spiritual excellence look like in that? And that's one of the things I've been exploring. That's why I I value spiritual practices, daily spiritual practices. Are we spending time every day just being still, not going for the ecstasy? Just, if you're on a spiritual path, are you quality time, significant time in silence every day? This divine presence needs us to just stop with the sensory overload and listen and be present to what's within. Having that as a daily practice became part of spiritual excellence, stillness. And I started finding my own answers to what I believed in and what mattered to me, and continue to do. I'll share one that helped clarify, and I'm sharing it with you because it just helped clarify things for me, this one little thing. One of the reasons why I was being challenged when I was at Agape, it was Ken Wilber who explained this. He compared trans-rational, which are mystics, to pre-rational, which are sort of magical thinkers. And he said the place where they meet is they're both non-linear. Rational thinking is very linear, right? It's very, this follows this, and this follows this, and this follows this. Magical thinking or pre-rational thinking is non-linear. Mystical thinking is also non-linear. And he said a mystical person, Reverend Michael is definitely a mystic, will attract, because they are non-linear, because they think in wholes, because they do everything, they don't break it down. It's just, this is what is, and you feel it, and you know it, but it includes the rational. I can't tell you how many times I tried to trip up Reverend Michael. I failed every time. He can meet me every time. I think, I got him now on some rational point, and he was just, he can transcend this world, but he absolutely can meet the rational thought. If you're magical thinking, you don't include. It's anti-rational. It doesn't make sense to your mind. You're like, that doesn't really fit with my rational thinking of how I see the world. And I think that was, and so he was attracting a lot of people who were magical thinkers and hadn't integrated their rational mind. And that was some of the confusion I was having in the community. And that helped me understand what I was experiencing. So that's just one example of these things that I had to discover on my daily journey. So to me, a life of excellence, going back to Judaism, if you look at the Old Testament, they have this presence always guiding them, and they're just struggling all the time. Well, what does this mean? How do we understand it? How do we live this? A big part of the Jewish practice is questioning. I think I might have shared with you when we had to go visit different religions when I was in ministerial school, and we went to a Jewish group, and it was on Saturday mornings, and it was with the rabbi. And it was so different versus saying, like with Reverend Michael, you're listening to the divine presence and opening your heart. The rabbi would say something, and everybody would argue with him. And I'm like, wow, that's so different. And you're expected to. The rabbi, that's the practice. Here's a verse in the Bible, here's my interpretation, and then people say, well, what about this? And I think maybe this, and they all get involved in the discussion, and there's all these different perspectives. And to me, that's part of excellence. So it's that expansive, big events, big moments, getting darshan, moving up to these higher levels, and at the same time on the daily living, how do I live this on my daily life? What are the struggle to figure out for yourself, because you can't live anyone else's other path. That's what we talk about here. That's why this teaching is so powerful and at the most difficult, because you're not following what the person before you is doing. You're not following what I'm telling you to do or what Reverend Michael's telling you to do. You're following what the Spirit within you, and that means there's no path before you. You are creating your path, which means you got to think about it. You got to wonder, what are my values? How do I show up today? What is important to me? That requires a lot more participation and effort, but to me, that's what makes an excellent life. An excellent life is about showing up and participating, whether it's a high moment or it's just the daily mundaneness of everyday life. We are being present with what is showing up in that moment, and we are fully engaging. I'm just recently have discovered the brilliance of Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton. I knew Julian really liked it, but he put it on my Spotify, so now I'm listening to it. I'm like, wow, this guy really is. And the musical itself is genius, but then you think, well, maybe it was just a fluke, or I think things like that. But he's on Twitter, and he's just consistently brilliant. I mean, he's just very creative. He participates on Twitter all of the time. And I was thinking, just even in how he's on social media, because social media can be a place where we numb out. He's on it Monday through Friday. Sometimes he takes vacations. When he's on it, he's on it. Like, he's not just numbing out, scrolling through things, just retweeting things randomly. He's participating, he's engaging, he's made all sorts of new friends on Twitter, and he writes these creative, inspiring things. Are actually coming out with a book with he starts every morning, good morning Twitter, or good morning friends, and with a little statement that he makes up, and he ends, it's 140 words or less, and they're always new, and they're always creative, and he does it 5 days a week. I'm like, this is genius, just to be able to churn this stuff out all the time. And they're so good, and they're brilliant, and so this one was this past week, and I thought this was great, because when you're in that spiritual enlightened state, there's that sense of, I want to be that brilliance, I want to be that excellence, those performing moments of sports excellence, musical excellence. If you're doing a project and presenting it to your clients, that excellence feels so good, but we also want to feel that we don't have to get there to be excellent, that our very regular, normal, ordinary day can be excellent. And so he wrote this was his good night message to everybody. He said, "Good night. Let others rush in with the instant reaction and the first. Process at your speed. Say exactly what you mean. Engage however you like. It's your timeline. It's your time." I thought, that's it. We create our reality. We participate. It's our time. There's no rush to get to enlightenment. Enlightenment, that's what I love about Zen. Chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, the laundry. It's about finding those ordinary moments. Am I great? Those ordinary moments, and finding the excellence, the spiritual excellence in everything, and finding it in a way that is in alignment and integrity with who you are. Living a most excellent life. And I will say, by doing this work, one of the reasons why I enjoyed seeing Reverend Michael so much, it actually started with Moulin Rouge. Remember, I was talking about Moulin Rouge. I've been getting into musicals, which is about, I was sort of anti-performance after a while. After Agape, I was anti that big high. So musicals were sort of the way I was coming in through the back door, because I was noticing that gave that same high. And so when I saw Reverend Michael, for the first time in a long time, I basked in it, because now I can do both. I can have the high, and I can have the mundaneness. The high does not take away from the everyday life, where before I used to compare them. They were sort of like, I should be feeling high all the time. I should be feeling this ecstasy all the time. But now I've had enough experience. I'm not going to feel that ecstasy all the time, and that's okay. Though everydayness is also brilliant and beautiful, and we can have both, and I could open my heart to all of it. To me, that's this most excellent life, integrating all these different parts of ourselves. So I want to end with one other thing. To me, as I was saying, leading an excellent life is about fully being present to what's happening in the moment, not numbing out, fully engaging with our hearts. There's no question that there's been a lot going on with women coming and sharing with the Me Too, with last year with Harvey Weinstein, and the sharing of times that women have been sexually assaulted or molested or hurt, harassed. And then I think recently it's come up again. I've had friends, I'm amazed, there's been so much shared. So, friends on social media sharing for the first time in front of everybody. Amazing things that were written. Sharing with me personally things that have happened. And one of the things that Reverend Michael said that I really love, so one of the things I like about Zen is there's two sides to every coin. He was celebrating. Isn't it wonderful that we live in this time and we can speak our truth, that we can come out, that he said, the mute button's off. Women are going to speak. We're going to speak, and that part is this. The silencing is over. That sexual harassment or molestation is something sort of pushed away. And I'm with him. But there's also the flip side, which is there's a lot of pain being shared that has not been shared before, that was repressed, that was pushed away. And I want to be really clear that as I share this is not about politics for me. And this is not about blame. As I've mentioned before, I have had incredible men in my life. My 3 brothers support me to the end of the earth, would do anything for me. They're incredible people. I have an incredible husband. I've had all through my journey just amazing men in my life. I do not say this to blame anybody. I'm saying this for a healing, because to be fully excellent is to be present when you see and feel and hear pain, to acknowledge it and to say, I feel and see and hear pain, and not to just dismiss it. If people are saying they're in pain, we want to acknowledge it. And I realized this more clearly yesterday, because I didn't even know that it was something. I mean, I knew that there was pain to be acknowledged, but I didn't realize that it was impacting me. Personally, I have not had any experience with sexual assault, and so I always thought, well, I'm hearing other people's stories and I'm feeling other people's pain. So I was surprised. A minister wrote something yesterday, which I'll share in a minute, and I just started crying. And we're all one. I hear others' pain, and it's my pain, but also, growing up in my family, as brilliant and wonderful as it was, there was no question that the feminine energy was considered less than the masculine energy. It was less valued and less worthy. It has evolved. My father evolved. My brothers certainly don't live there at all anymore, so I'm not speaking about what's now. But I can say we're evolving as a collective. We all are evolving. Women are evolving. Men are evolving. We're all evolving. So I'm not saying that what happened in the past is present, but I had to say it did impact me growing up, being the only girl and being treated very differently than my brothers. Not because my parents didn't love me. It was just a value system that hadn't woken up yet. So when I heard this yesterday, I burst out crying for my sisters who are in pain and are sharing it, who have always been in pain, but I'm hearing it more now than I've ever heard it. And just for my own sadness. So I celebrate what's happening, and I also want to acknowledge in our culture there's a lot of pain. So this gentleman who wrote, he's a colleague, he's a minister, and he actually grew up in this teaching. He's been in Science of Mind his whole life, and not just passively. He was so active when he was a youth. He was president of the whole youth program. Then he went on to college, ministerial school. He's been active in our organization, in the leadership council. He lives, breathes, and moves Science of Mind. And it was from that place and knowing that about him, what he said was he was listening to the pain of the women in his community. He was hearing it. And this writing just sort of spontaneously moved through him. And then he asked if we would have someone read it in our communities and share what came through him. And because it meant something to me, I asked Jack if he would read it. So this is not Jack's words, these are David Alexander's words. And Jack, if you would come up and read what David Alexander wrote.
This was written by Reverend David Alexander. Beloved women, I cannot know and do not know what it is to walk your walk. I do not know what it is to live your experience. There are times when you have been shunned, quieted, dismissed, disqualified, or ignored. I do not know what it is to routinely not to have my story believed. I do know that I can take responsibility right here and now to create a safe space, a safe place in this spiritual community and speak to you clearly and directly. Men, I invite you to turn toward the women near you and repeat after me. I see you. I hear you. Your voice matters to me. I see you. I hear you. Your voice matters to me. I see you. I hear you. Your voice matters to me. May the vibration of our affirmation and the meditations of our heart move out into the wider world and make a difference. And together we say, and so it is. Amen.
Spiritual excellence is healing and revealing that the divine is in the midst of all of us, through and as all of it. So let's pray. The hearts wide open, knowing that all that has unfolded in our lives up until this moment is heard, is seen, and is known. That each and every one of us is seen, heard, and known intimately, powerfully. That no one is alone. The divine presence is in, through, and as all creation, all time, and all space. Everything that has ever been experienced, there the presence of pure spirit is. And when we choose to turn our attention to that presence, we allow its healing energy to move through and as us. We allow it to continue to flow in, through, and as us, breath by breath, moment by moment, as it pervades everything that we have ever been and ever will be. That our entire interior world is being transmuted and loved and healed and returned to its natural state of wholeness, of love and of peace, and of peace, and of peace, and of peace. This peace that passes all human understanding and includes all human experience. We become this place of the divine, first and foremost in our own lives. We stand in the power of this love and this light and this energy and this freedom and this wholeness, and embrace everything that has ever emerged in, through, and as us love. We can never be excommunicated by spirit. We are always, always, always loved and accepted. Nothing in us is ever rejected. Nothing in us has ever been rejected. We are loved, we are loved, we are loved, we are loved. And we open and we receive this love. We receive it. We feel it. We know it. And as we know and feel the power of this love, the infinite oceanic healing power of this love, we become that wonderful healing energy for not only our own lives, but for all those people who are in our lives, surrounding and unfolding us in love and transformation. The divine presence is becoming alive and activated as our hearts and our bodies and our minds are opening and opening and opening into infinity. Life and energy are pouring through and as each and every one of us, not only in those beautiful high moments, but through the everyday moments, through the moments of crisis and pain, and through the everyday mundaneness. It is always in all aspects of life, and we see it, we embrace it, and we know it. We are absolutely courageous in our willingness to turn towards this presence over and over and over and over again, with our hearts full of forgiveness and peace. And so right now I invite us, even as we know and feel the wholeness of our own being, that includes everything that we've ever experienced and known and felt. We know this for friends and family who are experiencing also pain and sadness, memories. And we know that the divine presence is right where they are. It's being activated through this prayer, through this power of prayer, through the power of conscious realization that there is ultimately, in the absolute, only this one extraordinary presence. And we are reminded that that is what is real, that is what is last, that is what is true. And as we know this for our friends and our family, we know it for this country, and we know it for this planet. one power, one presence, blessing and healing each and every one of us till we get so to the awareness that no matter what's happening in the conditions and circumstances of our life, we are anchored in the awareness, in the depths of stillness and silence, and into the heights of ecstasy and freedom. One power, one presence. We remain stable and absolute in this unchanging, beautiful, powerful reality. We are that life now. We do the work day in and day out to remember who and what we really are. And as we know this, I hold this beautiful being called Mariah Davis, the life of pure spirit, knowing that as she has made her transition to the other side, that she is surrounded, that this light never ends, there's no death. The body dies, the soul continues, and her soul is continuing and is surrounded in light and in love. Healing energy on the other side of the veil, grace, and those who loved her on this side of the veil are being surrounded in comfort, peace, and tenderness, that they are not alone. There is only one. There is only this love. There is only this love. There is only this love. We trust it with our whole heart, body, mind, and soul. We give our entire being, everything that we are, the dark and the light, to this one. And in this we know and feel and experience pure grace. Thank you, Mother, Father, God, infinite and eternal one. To God be the glory. I release this word now into the law of life, knowing that as it is spoken, it is done. And I invite us all to say together,